Welcome to the Rotary Club of Milwaukee. I'm President Steve Chevalier, Director at Zilber Limited and the Zilber Family Foundation. What a rousing way to start our program. You may have noticed that we played the songs for each of the armed services of our country, Army, Navy, Marines, Air Force, and the Coast Guard. If we were meeting in person, of course, we would have asked each veteran or active service member to stand when their branch of service was called. Sadly, we can't do that today, but we'd like to thank each of you for your service to our country. And thanks to the Navy Great Lakes Band for supplying the music for today's program. We're meeting for the 8th time virtually in our 107-year history today, and we're going to honor our veterans and armed services men with the national anthem. And now Tom Gale, himself a Navy veteran and the senior advisor and partner with SVN Hinsey Commercial Real Estate, will make our invocation for today.
Thank you, President State. Faithful Father, thank you that you are the source of all true joy in life. For those who serve our country in the military, both on active duty and retired, we pray that they would be filled with your strength flowing through them. We thank you for their sacrificial service on our behalf. We pray that they would carry out their work with integrity and honor. We praise you that our names are written in your book of life. We thank you that your grace has been sufficient throughout our life and will faithfully carry us home with God's help from above. Amen.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you for your service to our country. And on a very personal note, I would like to take this rare opportunity to honor my older brother, Vincent Raymond Chevalier, who died while serving in the U.S. Navy in Sasebo Harbor, Japan in 1955. He was transferring equipment from the USS Chevalier, a destroyer, to the USS Hamner and got washed overboard during a typhoon. He's always been my hero, and I just wanted to take this opportunity to honor him. And now for some club business. We have a new member to introduce today. Past President Kathy Eilers will introduce another Kathy, Kathy Eiley.
Thank you, President Steve. It's my pleasure to introduce Mayor Kathy Eli to the Rotary Club of Milwaukee. Kathy was sworn in as the 16th mayor of Wauwatosa in April of 2012. She dedicated her terms to guiding the city's growth in a fiscally responsible way that balanced economic growth with maintaining quality city services and strong neighborhoods. She just completed her second 4-year term, and Wauwatosa's loss is Rotary's gain because now she can become a Rotarian. Before serving as mayor, she served 5 years as the executive director of the Village of Wauwatosa Business Improvement District, overseeing the creation of a strategic development plan for the commercial district and attracting new restaurants and shops. This is an area that has been impacted by flooding and the MMSD flood mitigation efforts. As a successful business owner and commercial developer prior to being mayor, she revitalized an office warehouse into thriving restaurant, retail, and office space. She brought her expertise in building relationships and collaboration to the role of mayor, and I know she will do the same as a Rotary member. Mayor Eli is a tireless volunteer in the arts, education, and civic organizations and has served on many, many board of directors, including the Urban Alliance, Visit Milwaukee, the Wisconsin Humanities Council, and others. She was on the Education Foundation of Wauwatosa, the Wauwatosa Neighborhood Association Council, and served as a professional development person for the Milwaukee Ballet, Children's Hospital of Wisconsin, Milwaukee Public TV Friends, and Kathy and I met with our work with after breast cancer diagnosis, ABCD. Kathy is a graduate of the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee with a degree in educational policy and community studies. She was named Milwaukee Business Journal Woman of Influence in 2016 for the work she did in the Wauwatosa community. She's married to her husband, Kent. They have 2 children and 2 grandchildren. And I hope you will join me in a round of virtual applause as we welcome Mayor Kathy Eli to the Rotary Club of Milwaukee. Kathy?
Thank you. And Kathy, that was a beautiful introduction. It makes me appreciate why at times I felt so tired over the past years. But I am thrilled to be part of the Rotary now. So much of what the organization does is things that are very close to my heart, with education and ecology and just helping build communities. So I'm absolutely thrilled now to have this opportunity in my next adventure in life to be part of the Rotary Club. Thank you.
Well, welcome to our club, Kathy. I look forward to seeing you again in person one of these days. You're going to be a great addition to the club.
Thank you.
We'd also like to thank Dr. Bob Gleason for his Thursday snack program last week, talking about COVID-19, the second of his series on how to cope with this. It's now on the YouTube channel if you want to check it out, and feel free to share it with your friends. We're lucky to have such a resource as Dr. Bob in our club at a time like this. He's also starting an interesting book reading at Tolstoy Together Rotary Book Club. So those of you that always wanted to read War and Peace, you can read 15 pages a day. It takes about 30 minutes, I'm told, for War and Peace. And he'll discuss that work as a metaphor for the COVID-19 pandemic. So contact Dr. Bob Gleason or the Rotary office if you'd like to join that group. It sounds like an interesting read. You also recently received a letter from us talking about supporting Rotary's efforts to end polio, and thereby supporting our worldwide efforts to also help in the COVID-19 situation because of the infrastructure that's out there already for our polio efforts. We have received $9,000 in donations. No, wait, it's up to $10,525 as we speak. So thank you everyone that's contributed so far. We have a $12,500 match from the Zilber Family Foundation. We're this close to getting that match. I would really like to hit that match and cost the foundation a little more money. So please, even if it's a small amount, every bit helps. Will be matched by the foundation and then matched again by the Gates Foundation. So your dollar becomes $4. Tomorrow, May 13th at noon, we're again partnering with the Milwaukee Press Club and WISP Politics at an event with our newly elected County Executive, David Crowley. Now, there's information about the program in your emails this morning. The registration for their meeting is full. However, you can watch it. It's going to be streamed on the Press Club's YouTube channel. So look at that email to get the details. And finally, before we get to our speaker, I'd like to say a few words about the Q&A. As always, if you'd like to ask a question directly of Captain Brasseur through Mary McCormick's help, hit the chat, type in your question and hit enter, and we will try to get to all of your questions. And now, Phil Bohlrath, a PR consultant with the Public Affairs and also the Public Affairs Officer for Armed Service Week, who served in the Naval Reserves for 25 years, will introduce our speaker for today. Take it away, Phil.
Thank you, President Steve. Our guest today speaks to us from NATO headquarters in Brussels. He is Michael Brasseur, Director, Naval Armaments Cooperation, U.S. Mission into NATO, and Director, NATO Maritime Unmanned Systems Innovation and Coordination Cell. Captain Brasseur is the Director of Naval Armaments Cooperation, as I mentioned, to NATO. And in his work with the Unmanned Systems Innovation and Coordination, he is aiming to enhance the alliance's capability through unmanned and manned teaming. Prior to joining the U.S. mission to NATO, Captain Brasseur commanded the USS Milwaukee during its pre-commissioning, the USS Freedom, and the USS Fort Worth, which sailed from Fort Worth home to San Diego from her maiden deployment to Southeast Asia. Michael has also commanded the USS Whirlwind, forward deployed to the Arabian Gulf in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom. He is currently pursuing a Global Master of Arts in International Relations from the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy, which he is expected to receive this year. His talk, Leading in Challenging Times, describes how to win over the COVID-19 virus in the military. And so it is without any further ado that we go to Brussels. And here is our guest speaker, Michael Brasseur, Captain Michael Brasseur.
Well, good evening from Brussels. Hopefully everybody can hear me okay. I will assure you, I don't have a beer in hand, or I'm not eating chocolate or waffles, but just wanted to say hello from Brussels. As you saw during the scrolling PowerPoint there, I've spent a lot of time in Milwaukee. I have a very strong connection, spent a lot of time in your schools, and really built a unit, the pre-commissioning unit Milwaukee, which ultimately became USS Fort Worth, and really ingrained some of the stuff I learned there. So what I'd like to do today is talk to you about building a winning team. And this is sort of fusing together some experiences I had on the LCS, here at NATO, and also I did have a battle with cancer. So just kind of fusing those experiences in there and sharing what I've learned.
Excuse me, Captain. Captain, can I? There's a crackle that I think is coming from your microphone.
Okay.
I don't know whether maybe if you can you speak directly into the computer.
Is this better?
Yes, much better. Thank you.
Okay.
Good. Okay.
So as I was saying, I have a very strong connection to Milwaukee. Spent a lot of time there. You will be glad they didn't show a video of that first pitch at the Brewers game because I airmailed it to the backstop, but the pictures look all right. Before we get started, I just did want to thank those in the healthcare industry for what they're doing during this global pandemic. As one soldier to another, I salute you and all the fine work that you're doing to keep us safe during this global crisis. So as I mentioned, I'm coming to you as a former captain, as a cancer survivor, and as someone working in the most powerful global alliance on the planet. So that's kind of my perspective today. So when I got selected to be the commanding officer of USS Milwaukee, we were a pre-commissioned unit, so we were building everything from scratch. And as we started doing that, I focused on three things: vision, values, and culture. And ultimately, we did build a winning team, and I'd like to share a few of those experiences with you. So next slide, please. I want to spend a little bit of time on vision because I think it's very important. And this proverb here, I'm sure you'll recognize it: where there's no vision, the people perish. And on LCS, it was extremely challenging because it was a new program. It's a very challenging ship. We often kind of joke that LCS stood for let's change something. So in that sort of environment, with everything changing, much like it is now, you really have got to paint a clear vision for your people. You've got to look out over the horizon and paint what victory looks like for them. And it's got to be very clear, something that they can aspire to and go get after. So I spent a lot of time describing what victory looked like for our crew. And even as things changed, as I mentioned, we got changed to a different ship and our schedule changed a million times. The vision was still clear. We were going to be a combat-ready warship, ready to deploy anywhere, anytime. And we knew that, regardless of what changed in the meantime. Next slide. So it's one thing to talk about, to paint a beautiful picture of what you imagine things to be like, but it's quite another thing to turn it into a reality. And I love this quote from Leonardo da Vinci, because I think he's, number one, a brilliant person, but it's so important to think well to the end, to think about what you want to do, and then walk it back to what it takes to arrive at that end state. In this process, this is where we would engage the crew, an extremely intelligent crew, and would engage and we'd put together a plan. And obviously a plan needs to be flexible as things change. And again, we're living this on a daily basis with the COVID crisis, pandemic. But this sort of deep thinking about what you need to do and the secondary and tertiary effects of those decisions. So just wanted to highlight Da Vinci's quote there, because I thought it was very important as we developed our vision and a plan to make the vision a reality. Next slide, please. So I'm talking to you from Brussels, right? Headquarters of NATO, now at 30 members, over 70 years old, with no world wars during their existence. It's a really wonderful place to work. It can be a bit frustrating at a time, as you're trying to get 30 allies to go in the same direction. But I'm reminded of this African proverb: if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, just as NATO's done, go together. And so on the unit level, as far as with the U.S. mission, as far as with the crew, we employed a team of teams approach because we knew we had more work than, at that time it was 53 crew could do. And so we knew we needed to team up with our LCS squadron and other various entities to get what we needed to done. Get what done which we needed to do. Easy for me to say. But just a recognition that you can't do it alone. It takes a team effort to get the mission accomplished. Next slide, please. Okay, with that in mind, we wanted to have a set of core values, something that was central to everything we were doing. And we focused on two things, as we go through this issue, or as you lead your team, you certainly could choose two others, or three others. But we chose these, and we looked at strength holistically. We looked at body. We got after it. We worked on the BUDS-O course. We trained because we knew that just how challenging that work would be on the ship. We knew we had to be strong in body. We looked at it from a mental point of view as well. As I mentioned, my crew was extremely bright. and we pushed each other to get sharper. I can feel that here at NATO as well. Working together with allies, we really push each other. We really challenge each other to think harder and think smarter. And so it's a real intellectually stimulating atmosphere here in Brussels. And then the final point is soul, strong in soul. And you saw a couple of photos of us in your schools in Milwaukee. We wanted a strong connection to Milwaukee. We wanted to get into the heart of Milwaukee. We went to some of your toughest schools and we talked to them about science, technology, engineering, and math. And we mentored and we encouraged young people to choose careers in that space, because we need that sort of expertise in the Navy, and we need it as a nation. Second point, which was very important to us, was trust. Trust is essentially the lifeblood of a crew. Without it, you're nothing. You cannot accomplish the mission. And trust takes a lot of time to earn. It's pretty clear. You just commit to people, be honest and open with them, and you do what you say you're going to do. And obviously the surest way to lose trust is to have a divergence between what you said you were going to do and what you actually did. But trust, we spent a lot of time building trust for our crew. We did a lot of stuff outside the ship to build those relationships. And we saw that pay back in spades when things really got tough. You could not break our crew apart. Trust is key here at NATO. It's essential through the alliance. You can see would-be, how should I say this, adversaries try and poke gaps in between the alliance, but it's just not happening. Our center of gravity is our unity here at NATO. So next slide, please. Okay, culture. And this is where I'll kind of refer to our experience in Milwaukee. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. I love this, and it's so true. And even a good culture can overcome some average leadership in most instances. And you know, my crew's culture was able to overcome maybe some not optimal decisions that I made. Okay, next slide. Okay, so we kept it simple. We wanted to be a winning team, and we were willing to work hard to do that. We wanted to have a good time along the way, and we wanted to be humble. I think that's a very important thing. When I was visiting Milwaukee, I got a sense that this was a hard-working town where people get after it and they put in a real honest day's work. And that kind of stuck with me. You know, working on an LCS is really, really hard work. As I mentioned, there's more work than 53 people can do. I was amazed, just amazed how hard we worked. There's in my experience, I had to on many times ensure we got the rest we needed, because I don't think we would stop working because we knew what we had to do to get the mission done. Okay, happy. This is so important. This is so important to me. It was just so important to our crew. It was, you know, we like to have a good time. We love to have a good time. And when the crew started playing jokes on me, I knew we had kind of accomplished the culture we wanted as being happy. And I'll give you a funny story. How are we doing on time? Let me see here. We're doing okay. I can't give a talk without a sea story. So we were over in Singapore, bringing Fort Worth back to life. And we were changing out the lube oil and going through some major inspections. And, you know, one of the things that you don't want is water in your lube oil. And we were doing the final inspection before sailing our home, and we had fixed Fort Worth after their incident in Singapore, and we were doing some of the final checks. And my crew brought me, my engineers brought me a vial with oil and water mixed in it. And right away I saw it and I knew what it was. And I was like, oh no, oh no. Because I knew that would keep us locked to the pier for a while. And then after they saw me go through the roof, they said, oh no, this is the real sample. And so we had a good laugh about that. And then the last point, being humble. I've always been of the mindset that it's best to let your work do the talking. And we were just that way. We wanted to win, but we wanted our work to speak for itself. And then I think that's also a good way to look at problems, and especially in this sort of COVID environment. Recognize that maybe you may not have all the answers, but there's certainly opportunities to collaborate. That's a lot of what we're doing here at NATO. And then I guess coming to the last point, every team wants to win. They want to win and they're willing to work hard for it, but yeah, teams want to win. Teams want to be on a winning team, and at the end of the day, the work becomes the reward because you know you're driving towards something that's very important. So I think that's about it. Oh no, one more slide, and then perhaps the most important slide. I just wanted to finish with this because this is my crew. These are the people that I was honored to lead. You can see my chief engineer, Vince, right there on the top left of your screen, who just is a real tough guy from South Central LA. Just worked really fantastically. Obviously the crew there, we were in Kwajalein on the way back from Singapore. We had Abby Applegate on the right there, and then operations department. So I guess that's kind of where I'll stop and then be open to any questions.
Well, thank you, Captain. And yes, we have some questions coming in, so let me read them for you. The first question comes from our member Wolfgang Schmidt, who is, I believe, watching this in the Black Forest of Germany. So what's your interpretation of the joint drills between the Russian Navy and the PLA Navy in the Baltic Sea and in the Mediterranean in recent years? Is it more symbolic to show off the close cooperation between the world's two most powerful authoritarian regimes, or does it have real strategic importance, given the continuously growing firepower and sophistication of the PLAN? Have a drink of water.
Whoa. Okay. And who asked the question there?
Our fellow Rotarian, Wolfgang Schmidt.
Wolfgang. Okay, great question. Obviously, we keep a close eye on both of those players on the world scene. My impression is that it's exactly as Wolf mentioned, two authoritarian regimes becoming closer and closer together. It is a matter of concern, but just keep in mind, you know, the alliance is 30 strong. It's very, very well organized, well equipped. I mean, we spend I think over $1 trillion on our defense. So I'll just leave it at that.
Okay. Have you ever experienced close encounters with Russian Navy ships or naval aircraft while serving under the NATO command?
So I'm in the headquarters. So
Okay.
I have not. So I've worked more on the political level here in Brussels, but our ships and aircraft have interactions, and I'm sure you've seen them in the news, and they've even had some videos of them.
Okay. And Captain, what adjustments did you make as you worked more closely with NATO and we as a country began?
Okay. So this is a great question. It was kind of what I was getting after at the beginning. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. So on a personal level, I really adjusted my mindset. I've always been a collaborator, but even more so now because I've seen the value of the collaboration. So for example, I'm working on a maritime unmanned systems project here, which is basically drones above, on, and below the water. And we just launched a new initiative with 14 nations and soon to be 18. And you can imagine, so the value proposition is clear, right? We the US could do this on our own, but it's so much more effective to do it with our allies. We can cover more space. We can work together interoperably. We can share technologies, and we can cover more ground. The ocean is big, and we've got a lot of ground to cover. So it makes a lot of sense to work with allies on that, and everything. So I guess coming back to the question, I've always been a collaborator, but even more so now.
Okay, great. Have they solved the technical issues with the LCS model?
Ooh.
I guess you should tell us what the LCS model is and what the technical issues were for those of us who aren't quite familiar with the question too.
So I've been away from the program for about 4 years right now. I do have a good friend who was a former commanding officer. I just don't feel qualified to answer that now. I can tell you my experience on Fort Worth. Fort Worth was a phenomenal ship. Of course, we did have a crew operated the engines without the oil aligned, and that damaged them. My crew went over to Singapore, and we fixed the ship and sailed it back, and the ship performed wonderfully. I keep an eye on the program, but not to the level of detail where I could answer that in the specificity. But I will congratulate Marionette Marine and Fincantieri for winning the contract for the FFGX. That's a big win for Wisconsin and Marionette and the Fincantieri team. So
it is. You might want to just take a minute to tell the people on the call who might not know what that is. Tell us about the ship for a little bit and why it's going to be such an improvement over what we have today.
So are you talking about the frigate or the LCS?
I would talk about both.
Okay, so the Littoral Combat Ship, which you have two models, one made in Marionette, the other made in Mobile, Alabama. It's a shallow draft. Speed is of the essence. Lightly armed, but getting more armaments. So it's a very, very capable ship. Relies very heavily on unmanned systems to accomplish the mission, and it's deploying around the world. So that's an LCS. A frigate is, I'm sorry, and the LCS they were originally designed to swap out the mission modules, but now they're single mission.
Okay.
Whereas a frigate is a multi-mission ship. It should be likely more capable with more armaments, and so you need this kind of force mix within the Navy to accomplish the many missions that we have around the world. So the U.S. Navy, you recently competed competed a project for a new ship, and Fincantieri's FREM, which is I believe a French and Italian design, that won the competition.
Great. And from Tom Gale, our invocator, Captain, you talked about how hard the crew worked aboard ship. What was the watch schedule? How many hours on, how many hours off? And what was your work schedule like as well?
Okay, great question. We so a lot has changed since I've been on the ships. You know, we did have a couple of incidents over in Asia with the collisions, and but before that, each watchstander had a 4 or 5 hour watch per day, and then a lot of work to do outside of that. So, and myself, the captain's always on watch, you could say, but I would probably work 10 to 15 hours a day and be sure to get some fitness in as part of that.
Good. And Bill Sheehan says, thank you so much for your service. How do you think naval weapon packages will change as more innovation and unmanned weapons develop? For example, will the need to have pilots on aircraft carrier fighter jets change at some point in the future? In other words, will the pilots control aircraft from off-site like some drone operations today?
Yeah, so I think the future is unmanned. Okay, it's unmanned for a couple of reasons. It's one of it is it's less expensive. For example, a new destroyer that we're putting out costs about $1.8 billion, and unmanned ships are less expensive, a lot less expensive than that. But there will always be always be a manned unmanned teaming sort of situation. So I believe you've seen a company come out with they call it the Royal Wingman, which will be an unmanned aircraft along together with a manned aircraft. This is what I focus on a majority of my work here, and I see the future going towards unmanned, but a strong manned unmanned team. And then obviously a person in the loop for any sort of weapons employment. And then as we talk about artificial intelligence and stuff like that, there's a need to know, need to understand the probability level of the data that we're getting to make decisions on.
Okay. Do the members of NATO meet daily or just at major meetings? This is from President Steve.
Great question, Steve. So there's permanent staffs here in Brussels that meet daily. Our senior person here is Ambassador Kay Belly Hutchinson. She sits on the NAC, North Atlantic Council, and she and I work for her, and we have various committees that meet on a regular basis. Now, throughout the year, we have foreign ministers. So Secretary Pompeo and his counterparts will come over. And then we have a defense ministers. So Secretary of Defense comes out, and that's a couple times a year. And then we have summits. So when the presidents come out. So that's the routine meetings, but on the daily basis, we're meeting together on a committee level.
Terrific. We have a question that came in about preparing for the pandemic, and I know you wrote an article which we shared, but I would guess that some people haven't had a chance to read it yet. Do you want to summarize what you talked about in your article?
Yeah.
For us today?
So I wrote an article back in March. It was published in Proceedings magazine, which is from the U.S. Naval Institute. And what I tried to do was just basically share those experiences that I had leading the crew on pre-commissioning Milwaukee, which ultimately became USS Fort Worth, that focus on vision, values, and culture. And I thought it was important during a crisis to articulate a clear vision of where we're going, to be strong personally and as a nation and as allies, to build trust amongst ourselves, and to be hardworking. And I really took a note from as far as hardworking. I just am extremely just in awe watching the healthcare professionals fight on a daily basis. Each night here in Brussels at 8 o'clock, we all go out and we celebrate our healthcare professionals, and just have so much respect for them here in Brussels and in New York and in Milwaukee and Paris and all over the world. I guess my point was there. We've got work to do, and let's get after it and look no further than the healthcare workers doing that. Happy. I think humor is so important in even in the times like this. My favorite meme that came out as part of the COVID thing. They've got this husband ask, there's a anonymous voice asking, you have just been told you will be quarantined. Do you A, quarantine with your wife or kids, or B, he says B. So I just, and there were so many great memes going around. I think that's so important in these crazy times, to laugh, to be happy. I know that sounds counterintuitive, but I thought that was very important. Humble. The humble part, I felt, and I shared in the article, that this isn't a time to collaborate at a unprecedented levels amongst friends, as we were suggesting there. And then winning. We will win this battle, and that's never been in question. So that's kind of the themes I was getting after in the article. I hope you read it.
That's good. And Francis Vogel says, please discuss the Open Skies Treaty and sort of the pros and cons of why the United States should or shouldn't remain an active party to it.
Francis, I'm sorry. I'm not. I can't answer that.
Okay. How does NATO work in conjunction with the U.S. Navy in the Gulf?
Okay, that's a good question. I believe NATO has they've got some forces that deploy to the Arabian Gulf. They have these standing naval forces. I believe we've got a couple now in the Mediterranean, and occasionally they'll go to the Gulf, but I need to confirm that. But basically, what's great about navies is it's really easy to integrate anywhere around the world.
Okay. So what's the buzz at NATO these days? What's the top of mind chatter, do you think?
I mean, the focus is on the COVID, right? So not necessarily, the focus is on doing the mission in these circumstances. We still have a mission to do. We provide security for our alliance of 30 nations, and we've got to do a job to do. And we also have to communicate as well. There are some there's some misinformation campaigns trying to drive wedges between the allies, and it's misinformation. We're cooperating we always cooperate, so.
That's terrific. Now you're going to be leaving Brussels and going to Bahrain soon. Do you want to tell us a bit about what your new assignment will be?
Yeah, so I'll be finishing up this summer here in Brussels. Then I've been selected what's called Major Command. So the LCS was 05 Command and Major Command is 06 Command. And I'll be in charge of a squadron of ships out in the Arabian Gulf. So I'll be first the Deputy Commodore for a year, and then the Commodore after that, and just executing U.S. foreign policy in the Arabian Gulf, keeping sea lines of communications open for friends and allies.
Now, is piracy an issue in the Arabian Gulf?
It's funny you mentioned that because I don't know if everybody will remember, I was actually over there on watch during the Maersk Alabama issue several years ago. I'm not current on what's going on now, but I'm sure there's probably some issues with piracy off the coast, the Horn of Africa, people trying to make their livelihoods. But for the most part, I think we've tamped it down significantly.
Okay. And I think we have one more question, unless anyone else wants to submit some. And a fun one to end on is, what kind of jokes did your crew play on you when you were building your happy culture? Do you have another favorite, or?
I think they just like to do things that like would get a reaction out of me. So for example, we like I said, fitness was one very important to us. We did a lot of exercises off the ship. And one morning we did yoga, and so we all show up with our yoga mats there. I mean, we on Coronado, which is not a bad place to be. And one of my male sailors showed up in yoga pants. A little bit more than I wanted to see sailors. So that sort of thing. It was playful, but I think we just like to have a good time.
And a question about your family. I guess I know, how many children do you and your wife have, and how old are they, and are they moving along with you?
So I have two boys from a previous marriage who at one point we named the engines on Fort Worth after them. They're Bruce and Brooks. Bruce is 19 years old, and he's a student at the University of South Carolina, big into AI, doing some really interesting things. We actually applied for a patent for one of Bruce's inventions. Brooks is 17, also with my ex in Beaufort, South Carolina, very big into physics. I think he's taking his AP physics exam today, and then going to the governor's school in South Carolina next year. And then I'm 45, and I also have a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old. And so the 4-year-old is my daughter, Leonie. I have a Turkish friend. He says, you can't call yourself Papa until you have a daughter. And I think that's a true statement. So Leonie is 4 and going on 14. And then we had a little European surprise. We were in Bordeaux for Leonie's baptism. And perhaps I had one too many drinks. And now we have a 4th child, Louis, but we're very happy to have Louis. So I have 3 boys, 1 daughter. Louis and Leonie are going with us to Bahrain, and Louis and Bruce and Brooks will be staying in South Carolina. But I go home to see them often, and really I was supposed to go last month, this month, and but you know how it goes with the COVID.
Right. And one other question before we turn this back to Steve, but you mentioned your son is working in AI. How do you see AI playing a role in naval armaments and in the work that you do going forward?
So I think, so we have so much data to process, right? So AI can help us in that regard. But, and this is one of the things we deal with ethically, is what if the AI makes a prediction or something that's wrong, right? Is it the programmer at fault here? And so we sort of are dealing with that. I think there'll always be a man or a person on the loop, not necessarily in it, but on it to where we can, on the decision loop where we can stop an engagement and stuff like that. So I don't think we'll get to the stage where robots are deploying weapons on their own. But it can be very helpful in that information gathering stage where you're building a picture of what's going on. But in the engagement side of the equation, the kinetic side of the equation, I don't see it.
Great. Okay. Well, I will turn this back to Steve, but thank you very much for taking the time to be with us today. It was very informative and very helpful. And we're certainly very pleased that you are representing us in NATO and doing such a fine job. And we'll be moving on to Bahrain and representing the US there with all of your compassion and integrity. So thank you.
I just had one thing I wanted to say, Mary.
Sure.
Today I was on that Russia question up front. I was speaking as Michael Brasseur, not the U.S. mission to NATO or anything like that. I don't want to inadvertently make policy up front. So I just wanted to make that clear. That was a great question from
Wolf.
Yeah. That was a great question. And I just wanted to share those were my personal kind of perspectives of the situation. But, obviously,
good.
I'm not speaking on behalf of the U.S. government.
All right. Terrific. All right. Well, thank you again. And President Steve, would you like to close us out?
Thank you, Michael. Great presentation. And thanks for all of your time and energy putting this together. One more disclaimer, I think you should notify people that the Blue Jackets manual has no chapter in it on playing practical jokes on your superior officers. So as you know, probably from your prior time with us, Rotary is very involved in eradicating polio throughout the world. So in honor of your presentation today, we're going to make a donation to Rotary to purchase another 50 doses of the vaccine to get us that much closer to a world free of polio and hopefully help with the infrastructure to combat the COVID-19 virus. Again, see your screen, folks, for the virtual presentations that are coming up at the end of this program. Also visit the links in our email after the meeting today to register for our snack programs for Thursdays and our coffee connector on May 21st. In your connecting email last Friday, our Sergeant at Arms, Barbara Velez, did another nice cameo for one of our members, Janine Colbeck. I really encourage you to read it. And to show you how timely we are, not only is Janine a great Rotarian and one of our younger members, but her father was a captain of a U.S. Naval submarine, and he was a president of a Rotary Club in the United States. So that's pretty serendipitous.
Yes.
Janine has a very interesting profile in life. I think you'll like reading it. She's going to head up the Douglas McKee Christmas Club next year. She's very involved in the community. She's the first Rotaract member to become a Rotarian in the Rotary Club of Milwaukee. And she's a world traveler. So please pick it up and read it. Next week, we're going to have David Vila, Executive Director of the State of Wisconsin Investment Board. That should be a very interesting presentation. We encourage you to invite your friends and family and colleagues to view our programs, our virtual meetings. It's free. It only takes a minute. You can forward them the emails that you get early Friday morning, and it'll have the links for the participants to see the program.
And President Steve, I just have a message from Phil Vollrath asking us to one more time thank the Navy band at Great Lakes for providing the music. They did a great job, and they couldn't be with us in person, but we sure were thinking about them today when we listened to the music.
Yes, thank you, Phil. And it really is a shame that we can't have our normal program. We'll have it next year. Absolutely. So having said all that, let's go out and do some good in the world this week. Stay healthy and do what you have to do to help out as we slowly reopen our state. This meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.